What if their greatest power lies in their silence? This video unveils the hidden psychology behind quietly strong women, revealing how their unassuming presence profoundly shapes our world and makes an undeniable difference. There is an invisible force that shapes our perception long before we consciously recognize it. It whispers a simple, unquestioned rule into our cultural narrative. The loudest voice in the room must be the most powerful one. Society has been conditioned to equate volume with dominance, confidence, and authority. The one who speaks first, speaks boldly, or takes up the most space is often awarded the assumption of strength. And within this bias, something subtle but significant gets overlooked. The quiet woman, the one whose power does not erupt but accumulates. Her presence is misread not because it is absent, but because it does not obey the familiar script. The world rewards noise. It notices the person who interrupts, asserts, or declares. It celebrates sharp edges and quick words. Quiet strength, by contrast, is often misjudged. A woman who moves softly is labeled passive. A woman who thinks before she speaks is mistaken for unsure. A woman who observes instead of reacts is seen as disengaged. We underestimate her not because she lacks power, but because her power does not mirror the kind we have been taught to admire. Yet some of the strongest women are the ones who rarely announce themselves. Their influence is not loud, it is lasting. First impressions rarely capture this truth. The silent woman is often read at face value, gentle, pliant, unthreatening. She blends into the background in a world addicted to performance. But the longer you stand near her, the more you begin to notice what first impressions conceal. She pays attention in ways others rarely do. She studies tone, intention, emotional texture. She listens fully, not waiting to speak but absorbing the room. When she finally does voice something, it lands differently, not because it is loud but because it is precise. Her words carry weight because they are chosen, not scattered. They emerge from a mind that has been thinking long before it ever decided to speak. This is the quiet woman's imprint, subtle, patient, unmistakable once noticed. She can shift a conversation with a single sentence. She can disarm conflict without raising her voice. She can understand others more clearly than they understand themselves. But none of this announces itself on arrival. It reveals itself gradually, like the slow unfurling of a truth people assumed wasn't there. And perhaps that is why there is such deep curiosity around women whose power hides in silence. We live in a world fascinated by extremes, dominance, rebellion, confrontation, yet equally captivated by what we cannot immediately decipher. The quiet woman exists in that space of ambiguity. She is not passive, but she is also not performative. She does not demand attention, yet she commands it without effort. Her power does not shout, it settles. It lingers. It leaves people wondering how someone so understated could feel so compelling. The more society misunderstands quiet strength, the more people become intrigued by those who embody it. There is something almost unsettling about a woman who does not rush to explain herself. Something mysterious about someone who observes more than she reveals. Something powerful about restraint in a world built on reaction. And within that mystery lies a psychological tension. If her strength is not visible, how much of it have we missed? If her silence is not weakness, what is it protecting? And what does it say about us that we only recognize power when it rises instead of when it endures? This curiosity is not accidental. It is the natural consequence of living in a culture that misunderstands subtlety. Quiet power forces us to confront our own biases, our instinct to overlook what we cannot immediately measure. And so, the silent woman becomes a mirror reflecting a more uncomfortable truth. What is strongest is not always what is seen first. Quiet confidence is one of the most misunderstood psychological traits, especially when seen through the lens of gender and societal expectations. It is often mistaken for shyness, introversion, or a lack of assertiveness simply because it does not conform to the noisy, outward-facing expressions of strength that culture elevates. But quiet confidence is something entirely different, something deeper, sturdier, and far more complex. It is not the absence of expression. It is the presence of self-possession. It is not rooted in the need to be seen, but in the comfort of knowing that visibility has never been the true measure of worth. To understand quiet confidence, one must move beyond the stereotypes attached to introversion. Introversion describes a preference for internal processing, a comfort with solitude, a recharge found in stillness rather than crowds. Quiet confidence, however, is not a personality category. It is an internal infrastructure. A person may be introverted and not confident, or confident and not introverted. Quiet confidence exists in the woman who does not seek attention because she does not need it to feel whole. It exists in the woman who speaks softly not out of hesitation, but out of deliberation. It exists in the woman who chooses her battles wisely, because she understands that not every moment requires her energy. Quiet confidence is strength without spectacle. At the core of this trait lies an uncommon level of self-awareness. Women who possess quiet confidence move through the world with a subtle steadiness because they know themselves, truly know themselves. They are intimately familiar with their triggers, their patterns, their limits, their values. They have spent enough time observing their internal world to recognize what is genuine and what is noise. This becomes an inner compass, steady even in the midst of chaos. Because they understand what motivates them, they are less likely to be swayed by external opinions. Because they have confronted their own contradictions, they are not easily thrown off by contradiction in others. And because they honor their own emotional boundaries, they can maintain clarity even when others lose theirs. This self-awareness is not loud. It does not announce itself. Instead, it shows up in quiet moments. The decision not to respond immediately, the ability to walk away without theatrics, the confidence to say little but mean everything. It manifests in the subtle refusal to perform for approval, a refusal that unsettles people who rely on external validation. There is something disarming about a woman who is not waiting to be chosen, praised, or confirmed. Her autonomy is its own kind of gravity. And intertwined with this self-awareness is emotional intelligence, the quiet superpower often overlooked because it does not demand attention. Women with quiet confidence read rooms the way others read words. They notice shifts in tone, changes in posture, the hesitation behind a sentence. They can sense conflict before it forms. They can identify insecurity without judgment. They understand others not because they are trying to be liked, but because they have learned to observe before reacting. Emotional intelligence allows them to influence outcomes without force. They do not dominate conversations, they guide them. They do not escalate tension, they diffuse it with a single well-timed truth. They do not manipulate, they understand the emotional currents beneath the surface and navigate them with intention. In environments where louder personalities clash, their steady presence often becomes the quiet anchor others didn't realize they needed. This is the paradox of quiet confidence. Its subtlety makes it easy to miss, but its impact is impossible to forget. It does not rely on volume or performance. It does not need applause to validate itself. It is a strength expressed not in dominance, but in depth. A woman with quiet confidence influences rooms without raising her voice. She shapes dynamics without demanding control. She stands firm not because she is unafraid, but because she trusts her inner world more than the noise around her. Quiet confidence is not a facade. It is not a shield. It is the mature expression of someone who has spent years building internal stability. And once you recognize it, you begin to understand why it feels so powerful, because it is strength that cannot be taken away, shaken, or performed. It is strength that simply is. Silent influence is one of the most understated and least understood forms of leadership. It defies the conventional belief that authority must be loud, directive, or visibly assertive to be effective. Instead, it thrives through presence, consistency, and emotional steadiness. It is the kind of influence that emerges not through command, but through example, slowly, steadily, and often without recognition. While traditional leadership relies on instructions and performance, silent influence relies on alignment. a person's actions matching their inner values with such integrity that others naturally take notice. Leading by example often sounds simple, but in practice it requires a rare level of discipline. The quiet individual who leads through action does not need to announce intentions or justify decisions. Their guidance is expressed through how they move, not what they declare. When others talk about change, they demonstrate it. When others react impulsively, they remain anchored. When others lose sight of the larger picture, they embody steadiness. People tend to follow those whose actions remain reliable even under pressure. And the silent leader becomes a model not through performance but through consistency, showing, in subtle ways, that stability is more powerful than noise. But what makes silent influence truly compelling? Is not only what these individuals do, but how they listen. Strategic listening is a skill rarely cultivated, yet deeply transformative. It is not the passive act of waiting for one's turn to speak. It is the intentional practice of receiving the emotional and intellectual layers beneath someone's words. The quiet leader listens in a way that makes people feel seen rather than scanned. They notice uncertainty, insecurity, pride, and fear in a conversation long before those emotions surface openly. This depth of listening creates two powerful outcomes. First, it allows the quiet leader to understand the dynamics of a room with unusual clarity. They know when tension is rising before anyone admits it. They sense the real issue behind someone's defensive tone. They identify what is unsaid and what must be said without forcing it prematurely. Second, it allows their contributions to land with exceptional impact. Because they do not speak often, their words carry weight when they do. People lean in. They consider the thoughtfulness behind the timing. Even a brief comment from a quietly confident person can shift a room more effectively than a lengthy speech from someone who constantly needs to be heard. Silent influence also reveals itself through what can be called ripple effect leadership. The idea that integrity, calm conviction, and emotional steadiness create waves of transformation without overt intention. A quietly influential person does not set out to inspire. They simply act in alignment with their principles. The impact spreads naturally. Others gravitate toward their composure, their reliability, their refusal to participate in chaos. In turbulent environments, their grounded presence becomes a stabilizing force. In uncertain moments, their clarity becomes a reference point for others trying to navigate confusion. Ripple effect leadership also introduces a psychological shift. When people witness consistent integrity, they begin to reevaluate their own. When they encounter genuine calm instead of performative confidence, they reflect on the noise they have internalized. When they observe a person choosing restraint over reaction, they become aware of their own impulses. The quiet leader does not convert others through persuasion. They transform others by creating an emotional contrast, showing that there is another way to operate, another way to respond, another way to lead. This form of influence is not dramatic. It does not dominate rooms or spark immediate applause, but its effects are long-lasting precisely because they are grounded in authenticity. People may forget a loud directive, but they rarely forget the person who remained calm during conflict. They may overlook flashy leadership, but they return to the one who stayed thoughtful when others rushed. Silent influence leaves a deeper imprint because it reaches people on a psychological level rather than a performative one. In a world where visibility is often mistaken for value, the quietly influential person stands apart. They remind us that leadership is not defined by volume, but by resonance, by the subtle ways someone's integrity shapes their environment long after their voice has faded. Their strength lies not in commanding attention, but in embodying a presence that changes the room without ever needing to raise their voice. Quiet triumph does not always appear in the moments history celebrates most loudly. It often takes shape in the background, in subtle acts of courage, in measured restraint, in the refusal to be diminished even when the world expects silence. Across eras, Certain individuals have demonstrated that strength need not rely on volume to alter the course of events. Their influence emerges through composure, conviction, and a steady refusal to surrender their dignity. These are the women and archetypes who reveal how profoundly quiet power can reshape societies, institutions, and personal lives. History offers striking examples of this force. Eleanor Roosevelt, for instance, was not known for dominating rooms with theatrical presence. Instead, she built her diplomatic prowess on patience, empathy, and relentless consistency. She listened to voices the world ignored. She traveled to displaced camps, hospitals, and factories not for spectacle but for understanding. Her influence during the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not come from aggressive negotiation, but from her ability to hold steady when discussions grew tense. She guided people by grounding them, not by overpowering them. Her quiet firmness became one of the most stabilizing forces in mid-century diplomacy. Rosa Parks embodied an even more distilled form of quiet defiance. Her refusal to give up her seat was not a moment of spontaneous rebellion. It was a calm, controlled decision rooted in an unshakable sense of dignity. There were no raised voices, no dramatic speeches, no outward assertion of dominance. Yet that stillness carried a power to shift a national consciousness. Her silence on that bus, her refusal to meet aggression with noise, exposed the fragility of an unjust system. She demonstrated that quiet conviction can dismantle deeply rooted structures simply by refusing to comply. These historical figures show what quiet triumph looks like on a public stage. But the same pattern appears in modern life, in archetypes that continue to shape our working and social environments. Consider the CEO who listens more than she speaks. In a world where executive leadership is often conflated with assertiveness, she guides through observation and measured decision-making. Instead of commanding rooms with directives, she studies the patterns within them, who collaborates naturally, who hesitates, where tension originates. Her influence grows because people feel understood rather than managed. She makes fewer statements, but each one carries the clarity of someone who has absorbed more than most realize. Her leadership style becomes a source of stability, not intimidation. Or look at the educator who inspires without raising her voice. She does not rely on authority to command respect. Her presence is calm, her attention sincere. Students feel safe in her classroom, not because she demands obedience, but because she offers empathy. Her quiet encouragement creates an environment where learning becomes possible for those who struggle with noise, pressure, or fear. She changes trajectories not with force, but with presence. Many students recall her not for any grand moment, but for the subtle ways she made them believe they were capable. And then there are the everyday heroes, the quiet figures in our own lives whose influence often goes unrecognized simply because it lacks spectacle. The family member who holds a household together through consistency rather than control. The colleague who notices when someone is overwhelmed and steps in with a silent gesture of support. The friend who listens without rushing to fill the air. These individuals shape emotional spaces more deeply than the loudest voices around them. Their impact endures because it is felt, not performed. Quiet triumph reminds us that influence is often internal before it becomes external. It begins in the small choices, holding firm, choosing empathy, listening deeply, resisting injustice with composure. It does not need applause to validate itself, nor visibility to confirm its presence. It is the kind of power that moves slowly but permanently, altering the emotional landscape of environments simply by existing within them. What unites these historic icons, modern leaders, and everyday figures is a shared truth. Transformation does not always come from force. Sometimes it comes from quiet conviction, steady, dignified, persistent enough to ripple outward and reshape the world around it. Quiet power is not an inherited trait reserved for a select few. It is a practiced way of being, built slowly, intentionally, through moments of reflection and a willingness to understand oneself beyond the noise of the world. To cultivate quiet power is to step into a form of strength that does not depend on dominance or display. Instead, it grows from inner clarity, emotional steadiness, and the choice to move through life with intention rather than reaction. The path is subtle, but its transformation is profound. A natural place to begin is with reflective practices, simple, deliberate rituals like journaling and meditation that anchor a person in their inner world. Journaling is not merely an exercise in recording thoughts. It is a dialogue with the self. It reveals patterns the mind hides under daily routines. It shows fears that never reach the surface of conversations. It traces desires that remain unspoken. Over time, journaling becomes a mirror that reflects the truth behind impulses, doubts, and motivations. It helps separate inherited expectations from genuine values. It clarifies what drains energy and what restores it. The quiet power that forms through this clarity is subtle but unmistakable. Decisions begin to feel more aligned, reactions more measured, boundaries more natural. Meditation deepens this process in a different way. It teaches the mind to sit with itself without immediately seeking distraction or resolution. In stillness, a person begins to notice the undercurrents of emotion, restlessness, worry, yearning, fatigue. Meditation does not eliminate these feelings, but it creates space around them. It allows one to observe without becoming overwhelmed. This capacity to witness internal experiences without reacting impulsively becomes one of the foundations of quiet power. It builds the discipline to pause, assess, and choose rather than rush toward the loudest emotion. It strengthens the ability to remain centered even when external circumstances become chaotic. The pause itself becomes a superpower. In negotiations, a moment of silence can shift the balance of a conversation. It invites the other person to reveal more, reconsider, or adjust their approach. Silence creates room for truth to emerge. It removes pressure and exposes haste. In emotionally charged conversations, the pause prevents escalation. It signals that one is listening, processing, and choosing words with intention rather than reacting defensively. This kind of silence is not passive. It is active, strategic, and grounded in self-control. In decision-making, the pause breaks the cycle of impulse. It gives the mind a moment to distinguish between fear and intuition, between urgency and importance. Some of the strongest decisions are made not through rapid response, but through quiet consideration. People often underestimate how powerful a single thoughtful breath can be, how it can redirect an entire situation. The mastery of the pause builds a reputation for steadiness. Others come to trust the judgment of someone who does not rush or crumble under pressure. Cultivating quiet power also requires redefining success. Society rewards visibility, speed, approval, and external achievement. But quiet power does not grow in environments where worth is measured by immediate validation. Instead, it flourishes when the focus shifts from being recognized to being effective, from performing to contributing, from appearing confident to being grounded. When success becomes an internal metric, measured by alignment, integrity, and meaningful impact, quiet power becomes not only sustainable but deeply fulfilling. This redefinition releases people from the constant chase for acknowledgement. It invites them to prioritize work that matters over work that impresses. It encourages them to create value even when no one is watching. Ironically, when someone stops seeking external validation, their influence often increases. Others sense the authenticity of their actions and trust their intentions more readily. Quiet power grows strongest in individuals who no longer measure their worth by applause. Cultivating quiet power is not about withdrawing from the world. It is about engaging with it from a place of clarity, calm, and intentionality. Through reflection, silence, and a reimagined vision of success, a person builds a strength that does not waver with circumstance. Quiet power does not shout, but its presence is unmistakable, steady, grounded, and impossible to ignore.